The first time I realized my marriage might already be over, it wasn't because my wife said she wanted out. It wasn't because I caught some obvious text or found lipstick on a glass or any of the dramatic things people expect. It was because her younger sister moved into our house for 3 weeks, looked around like she'd walked into a funeral home, and got quiet in a way that made me feel seen and embarrassed at the same time. My name is Daniel. I'm 39, I live in Raleigh, and up until last fall I would have told you my marriage was strained but salvageable. Not good. Not close. Not warm. But still standing. Me and my wife, Alyssa, had been married for 10 years. No kids. Just a small brick house, 2 cars in the driveway, and the kind of routines people mistake for stability when really they're just habits that haven't collapsed yet. I work in commercial HVAC sales. It is not glamorous, but it pays well enough, and I built a decent life on top of it. Alyssa worked in donor relations for a private university, which meant she was always around polished people with polished voices saying polished things about purpose and impact. She used to come home and make fun of that world with me. We used to sit on the couch with takeout and laugh about the fake smiles, the networking language, the way everyone sounded like a brochure. Somewhere along the line, she stopped laughing with me and started sounding like them. At first I blamed stress. That is what men like me do when something feels wrong and we do not want to admit how wrong. We explain it away. We absorb it. We wait. Alyssa started getting colder about a year before her sister moved in. Not cruel all at once. Just harder to reach. If I touched her lower back in the kitchen, she would stiffen slightly like I had interrupted her train of thought. If I tried to kiss her at night, she would turn it into one of those quick dry pecks people give relatives at Christmas. The bed changed too. She started sleeping right at the edge, phone in hand, body angled away from me like the middle of the mattress had become a line neither of us crossed anymore. I brought it up gently the first few times. I said I missed us. I said she felt far away. She gave me the same answer in different packaging every time. Work was intense. She was tired. She had too much on her mind. Nothing was wrong, exactly. She just needed space. Space is a dangerous word in a marriage because it sounds reasonable right up until it becomes permanent. By late summer I had stopped reaching for her as much, not because I didn't want to, but because repeated rejection changes your posture. It teaches you to make yourself smaller before someone else does it for you. I got quieter. I stayed later at work some nights just to avoid sitting across from my own wife while she scrolled through her phone and answered me with one-word replies. Then her sister came to stay. Her name was Jenna. 28. Recently out of a long relationship, worked remote in digital marketing, the kind of person who always had big sunglasses on her head and 5 tabs open in her brain at once. She and Alyssa were close in that uneven way sisters sometimes are, where one talks more and the other understands more. Jenna needed a place for a few weeks while her apartment lease got sorted out after a breakup, and Alyssa volunteered us before even asking me. That should have bothered me more than it did. At that point I was so used to being informed instead of included that I barely reacted. Jenna arrived on a Sunday afternoon with 2 suitcases, a plant, and the kind of careful smile people wear when they know they're stepping into someone else's space. I told her the guest room was ready. Alyssa hugged her, showed her where the towels were, gave her the Wi-Fi password, ran through house details in that efficient clipped voice she'd been using more and more with me. Watching them together, I had this strange feeling that I was seeing a version of my wife I no longer had access to. She sounded warm with Jenna. Present. Interested. That first week, Jenna noticed things without announcing that she noticed them. That was what made it unsettling. She noticed Alyssa never looked up when I came home. Not fully. She noticed dinner felt more like 3 people sharing a waiting room than a family meal. She noticed Alyssa kept her phone face down on the table but never more than an arm's length away. She noticed I asked normal husband questions like whether Alyssa would be home for dinner on Thursday or if she wanted me to pick up wine for the weekend, and Alyssa answered like I was a coworker who had overstepped. None of that was dramatic on paper. That is the thing about a dying marriage. Most of it looks too small to explain to anybody else. It is built out of flinches, tone, timing, and little withdrawals no one can photograph. Jenna seemed to understand that. She never confronted either of us. Never played counselor. She just watched. Sometimes I would catch her face during dinner, eyes flicking between us, and I could almost see her trying to reconcile the sister she knew with the wife sitting across from me acting like I was a man renting a room in her house. Alyssa got even stranger with her phone once Jenna moved in. Before that, she had already become private. But now there was almost a performance to it. If a message came in while we were all sitting in the living room, she'd glance down instantly, then stand up and answer it from the kitchen. If she was texting on the couch and Jenna walked in unexpectedly, Alyssa would lower the screen so fast it was hard not to notice. Twice I saw her leave the room with the phone in her hand and come back empty-handed, like she had gone to hide it somewhere before returning. I saw Jenna notice it too. She did not say anything, but there was one evening when Alyssa stepped outside to take a call and Jenna looked at me from across the kitchen island with this expression I still remember. Not curiosity. Not gossip. Concern. The kind you do not offer unless you think someone is standing in the rain and pretending not to feel it. I looked away first. That might have been the most humiliating part of that whole month. Not the coldness itself. Being seen enduring it by somebody younger than me, somebody temporary in the house, somebody who clearly understood our marriage was in worse shape than I wanted to admit. Alyssa also started lying in ways that were too casual to sound rehearsed and too smooth to be accidental. She would say she had a late donor dinner, then come home smelling like a rooftop bar. She would mention a planning meeting that supposedly ran long, but then leave half dressed in a hurry like somebody had changed the plan on her. Once she said she was meeting an older alumna for coffee on a Saturday morning, then spent 40 minutes doing her makeup and changing outfits twice before leaving. I stood in the bedroom doorway watching her choose earrings for coffee and felt something dark and exhausted settle deeper in my chest. I asked whether this alumna was royalty. She said I was being annoying. That was another shift in our marriage. Questions that used to be normal had started getting treated like accusations. Curiosity was control. Confusion was insecurity. Pain was inconvenience. Jenna kept mostly to herself, working from the guest room during the day, headphones on, laptop open. But houses have rhythms, and when three adults live under one roof, everybody learns more than they mean to. She heard the silences. She heard the way Alyssa's voice changed depending on who she was talking to. She heard me in the garage one night staying out there 15 minutes longer than necessary after getting home, just sitting in my truck because I couldn't make myself walk back into that version of my life yet. One Friday, things got bad enough that even pretending felt stupid. Alyssa had been distant all week, sharper than usual, and glued to her phone. That evening I made dinner anyway. Salmon, rice, asparagus. Nothing fancy, just decent. Jenna came downstairs, thanked me, sat at the table. Alyssa came in 10 minutes later already dressed to go somewhere, black blouse, heels, perfume on, and said she had forgotten to mention there was last-minute university event and she wouldn't be eating with us. Forgotten to mention. I stood there holding a serving spoon, looking at my wife dressed for somewhere she had not thought I deserved to know about, and something in me finally gave way. Not loudly. I didn't yell. I just asked how many more times she was going to keep doing this. Keep treating me like an inconvenience in my own marriage. Keep acting like every question I asked was a problem and every night out was above explanation. Jenna froze at the table. Alyssa looked at me with that flat, impatient expression she had started wearing whenever my hurt threatened to slow her down. She said she did not have time for this. She said everything did not have to turn into a scene. She said if I was that miserable maybe I should think about why. Then she left. The front door shut. Her car backed out. Silence took over the kitchen so fast it almost rang. I remember staring at the untouched plates, feeling equal parts furious and stupid. Furious because I knew I had just been dismissed in front of her sister like I was some needy burden. Stupid because a part of me was still standing there shocked by behavior that had stopped being surprising months earlier. I sat down hard at the table and put both hands over my face. For a few seconds nobody said anything. Then I heard Jenna move. Softly. Carefully. She did not try to comfort me. She just stood there behind the chair across from mine, like she was deciding whether to step into something that could not be undone. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and hesitant, like she already regretted it. She said there was something she probably should not tell me. And before I could even look up, I knew whatever came next was going to make the house feel even smaller. Jenna stood by the table with one hand on the back of the chair, looking like she was already trying to pull the words back into her mouth. I lowered my hands and looked at her. Her face had changed. The casual younger sister energy was gone. She looked pale, tense, like she had crossed some invisible line just by speaking. I asked her what she meant. She hesitated long enough to make my stomach tighten. Then she said she did not know everything, and she did not want me to take what she was about to say and turn it into something bigger than it was without proof. That sentence alone told me whatever was coming was not small. She sat down slowly across from me, glanced once toward the front window as if she expected Alyssa to pull back into the driveway, then lowered her voice. She said Alyssa had been acting strange with her too. Not cold the way she was with me. Careful. That word stuck with me. Jenna told me that over the past week Alyssa had started taking calls in odd places. Back porch. Laundry room. Even outside by the side gate once, late at night, barefoot in one of my old sweatshirts. She said it was not just privacy. It felt like concealment. Like Alyssa was making sure nobody in the house could overhear enough to ask the wrong question. I asked if she knew who Alyssa was talking to. Jenna shook her head too quickly. Then she corrected herself and said she did not know for sure. For sure. Everything in me sharpened at that. She started explaining too much after that, which told me she was scared of where this could go. She said maybe it was work drama. Maybe there was something personal Alyssa did not want to share. Maybe she was overriding normal things because the atmosphere in the house already felt so bad. But then she mentioned one night earlier that week when she had come downstairs for water after midnight and seen Alyssa in the kitchen smiling at her phone. That did not sound like much on its own. I knew that. What made it land was the way Jenna described it. She said Alyssa looked soft. Open. Almost girlish for a second. Not the flat, irritated version of herself that moved around me like I was a chair she kept bumping into. Jenna said she had not seen her sister look that warm in this house once since moving in, and the fact that the expression was aimed at a phone in the middle of the night had bothered her enough that she remembered it. I sat there staring at the plate in front of me, food untouched, feeling the details settle into all the other details already living in my head. Then Jenna said the thing that really got under my skin. She said Alyssa had lied about at least one work event. A few days earlier, Jenna had been in the guest room on a video call for work when Alyssa came in to borrow a steamer. She was dressed up, rushed, distracted, talking about some donor dinner across town. Normal enough. But about an hour later, Jenna had checked social media while taking a break and seen a story from one of Alyssa's co-workers at a faculty fundraiser on campus. Alyssa was not in it. The event was clearly already underway. Meanwhile, Alyssa had still been messaging the family group chat about traffic and setup delays like she was on the way there. Jenna did not know what that meant. Neither did I, but it meant Alyssa had not been where she said she was. That much was plain. I asked why Jenna was only telling me now. Her face tightened. She said because she had hoped she was wrong. Because it was her sister. Because once you say something out loud in a situation like this, you cannot pretend you did not see it. And because watching the way Alyssa had just spoken to me, then walked out like none of it mattered, had made her feel sick. That part did something to me I did not expect. Not relief. Not validation exactly. Something heavier. Because it is one thing to suspect your marriage is rotting from the inside. It is another to have somebody else quietly confirm that the smell is real. I asked if Alyssa had said anything to her. Anything at all that might explain the lies, the phone habits, the distance. Jenna looked down at the table and ran her thumb along the edge of her water glass before answering. She said Alyssa had made a few comments over the past couple of weeks. Little ones. The kind that sound casual until you line them up. Comments about feeling trapped. About how some people wake up one day and realize they built a whole life before they figured out what they actually wanted. Comments about how safety can turn into suffocation if you stay in one version of yourself too long. I felt my jaw tighten when she said that, because it sounded exactly like the kind of polished emotional nonsense Alyssa's work world had been putting in her mouth for months. Vague enough to sound profound. Sharp enough to cut somebody standing close by. I asked if she ever mentioned another person. Jenna did not answer right away. Instead she looked at me with the kind of expression people wear when they are deciding whether the truth helps more than it hurts. Then she said there was a name that had come up a few times. Not in some blatant way. Just slipped into stories. Mentioned more than the context seemed to require. A man from Alyssa's office named Evan. She was quick to say it could be nothing. That maybe she only noticed because she had started paying attention. But once she noticed, she could not unnotice it. If Alyssa talked about a meeting, Evan's reaction to it got mentioned. If she complained about work politics, Evan somehow understood it better than everyone else. If she described some donor event that annoyed her, Evan had usually been there too, either texting during it or helping decompress after. I did not say anything for a while after that. I just sat there with the room going cold around me. Evan. A name I had heard before, now that Jenna said it. Not often, but enough. One of those names that enters your house disguised as work. A colleague. A harmless mention. A recurring extra in stories you do not realize are about him until it is too late. Jenna kept talking, maybe because my silence scared her. She said she was not telling me Alyssa was definitely cheating. She was not even telling me she knew there was an affair. She was telling me something was wrong enough that I deserved to stop feeling crazy. That was her phrase. Stop feeling crazy. I almost laughed when she said it, But there was no humor in it. Just exhaustion. Because that was exactly what the last year had done to me. It had trained me to distrust my own eyes. To second-guess every shift in tone, every locked screen, every unexplained dinner, every late return home smelling like a night she had not described. It had made me feel petty for noticing patterns and weak for being hurt by them. Jenna reached across the table then, not dramatically, just enough to rest her hand near mine without actually touching it. She said she was sorry. I told her she had nothing to be sorry for. But the truth was, by then I already felt the shape of something opening under my feet. Alyssa came home a little before 11. I heard the garage door first, then her heels in the mudroom, then the soft pause people do when they sense the house feels different before they even know why. Jenna had already gone upstairs. Not because she was afraid, I think. More because she understood that whatever came next belonged to me. Alyssa walked into the kitchen and looked at the plates still sitting there untouched. Then she looked at me. I was at the table in the same chair, same position, lights still on above the stove. I had not turned on the TV. Had not cleaned up. Had not tried to settle myself down. I wanted her to walk into the exact atmosphere she had left behind. She asked if I had really sat there all night. I told her I had been thinking. That made her tense. I saw it immediately. Not guilt exactly. More like irritation mixed with caution. Like she knew the timing had changed. I asked how the university event was. She said fine. I asked where it was. She answered too fast. A hotel downtown. Some donor thing. Same polished tone. Same easy packaging. Then I asked whether Evan was there. That was the first real crack. Small, but real. She did not freeze in some dramatic movie way. It was subtler than that. Her shoulders tightened. Her eyes sharpened. And for a second, maybe less, she looked less like an annoyed wife and more like a person recalculating. I noticed every bit of it. Then she asked me why I was suddenly asking about people from her office. Suddenly. That word told me she had not understood how long I had already been standing in the dark. I leaned back in my chair and looked at my wife, really looked at her, and for the first time in months I did not feel confused. I felt awake. Because whatever Jenna had just confirmed, whatever Alyssa had been hiding, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was finally asking questions that scared her. After I asked whether Evan was there, Alyssa recovered fast. Too fast. She gave me that same cool look she used whenever she wanted to make me feel like I had skipped 3 steps and arrived somewhere irrational. Then she asked if this was what we were doing now. Interrogations. Jealousy. Random office names pulled out of thin air because I was in a bad mood. I told her it was not random. She asked where I had even gotten the name. That was the moment I realized something important. Not about Evan. About her. Innocent people usually ask why you think something is wrong. Guilty people ask what you know. I did not answer her question. I just kept looking at her. She stood there in the kitchen with her purse still on her shoulder, car keys in hand, expression controlled but not as controlled as she wanted me to believe. Then she did what she had been doing for months. She turned the whole thing back on me. She said I had become impossible to talk to. Said every conversation lately had this heavy undercurrent, this silent accusation, this need for me that she could never satisfy no matter what she said. She asked if I had any idea what it was like coming home to that energy all the time. I remember almost laughing at that. Not because it was funny. Because for the first time, I could hear the structure of it. Deflect, diminish, accuse, exit. It was a system. Maybe not one she'd built consciously, but one she had used enough times that it ran on instinct. I told her I had asked a simple question. She said she was tired and did not have the bandwidth for another late-night spiral. Then she went upstairs. No answer. Just absence. And that, more than anything, told me I was done waiting for honesty to volunteer itself. The next morning, I changed how I moved. Not in some theatrical way. I did not slam cabinets or go cold or announce that I was onto her. I went quieter. More observant. I stopped filling silence with attempts to repair things. I stopped asking questions I knew would be brushed off. And once I stopped reaching, Alyssa seemed almost relieved. That hurt more than I expected. Jenna noticed the shift too. She did not bring up the kitchen conversation directly, but when she passed me in the hallway while Alyssa was on a call in the home office, she paused just long enough to ask if I was okay. I said no. It came out before I thought about it. She nodded once, like honesty was easier to work with than reassurance, and said if I needed anything, she was around. Then she kept walking. No drama. No pity. Just presence. That week, I started paying attention the way I should have months earlier. Alyssa had patterns. Everyone does. The problem was I had been treating hers like stress instead of data. She took her phone everywhere now. Not just room to room. Hand to hand. Counter to bathroom. Bathroom to bedroom. Bedroom to kitchen. If she showered, it sat on the vanity. If she changed clothes, it went face down on the dresser within arm's reach. Once, she forgot it on the couch while she ran upstairs for her laptop and came back down so fast it was obvious she had realized the mistake halfway up. I also noticed her voice changed depending on who she was messaging. When she texted family, coworkers she did not care about, or friends from college, it was quick and flat. Functional. But sometimes, usually late afternoon or after 9 at night, she would look down at the screen and something in her face would loosen. Not enough for anybody casually watching to clock it. Enough for a husband starving for signs to feel sick. One Wednesday, I came home earlier than expected because a client canceled. Jenna was in the kitchen making tea. She looked up when I walked in, then glanced toward the back patio doors. Alyssa was outside. At first it looked normal. She was just standing there with one arm crossed over herself, phone at her ear. Then I saw the smile. It was small. Private. Intimate in a way that did not need touching to be intimate. The second she turned and saw me through the glass, the smile vanished. She ended the call almost immediately, came back inside, and said it had been a work issue with the fall donor list. I asked if everything was handled. She said yes. Then she looked at Jenna. Not for long. Just a flicker. But it was enough. Enough to say she knew she had been witnessed. Enough to say this was no longer just happening in the blind spot between husband and wife. There was a third set of eyes in the house now, and she felt it. That night I could not sleep. Alyssa was beside me, turned away as usual, breathing evenly like the day had held nothing unusual at all. I stared at the ceiling and replayed the patio call over and over. Not because it proved anything physical. It did not. But because it confirmed what I had started to understand. Her warmth existed. I just was not where she spent it anymore. The next break came from something stupidly ordinary. A receipt. Thursday evening, Alyssa said she had to stay late for a donor strategy session. Jenna and I ate leftovers in the kitchen, barely talking. Around 10, Alyssa came home carrying a tote bag and her usual irritated exhaustion. She went upstairs to shower. A few minutes later, Jenna came into the laundry room where I was pretending to fold towels and held out a crumpled receipt. She had found it on the mudroom bench where Alyssa had dropped her bag. It was from a wine bar downtown. 2 glasses of Pinot Noir. 1 charcuterie board. Timestamp 7:18 p.m. No strategy session in the world looked like that. I took the receipt and stared at it until the print blurred. Jenna immediately said she was sorry, that she had not gone digging, that it had literally fallen out when she moved the tote so she could sit down to take off her shoes. I told her I knew. I believed her. That was not the issue. The issue was that I now had one concrete thing in my hand, and somehow that felt worse than all the uncertainty before it. Because uncertainty lets you bargain. Evidence does not. I did not confront Alyssa with the receipt. Not yet. Something in me wanted more than one small proof. Not for revenge. For clarity. I was tired of standing in a fog. The next morning, after she left for work, I opened our shared laptop in the den. I was not proud of that. But pride had started feeling like a luxury for people whose marriages were not being quietly rearranged around them. I did not have access to her phone. She had locked that down too well. But the laptop still held traces of the life she assumed I was not paying enough attention to notice. Calendar entries had gotten vaguer over time. I saw that immediately. Things that used to say donor dinner with names and locations now just said meeting, review, or campus. Broad enough to sound plausible. Useless enough to hide inside. Then I checked rideshare emails. There were not many. Alyssa usually drove. But twice in the last 3 weeks she had taken rides from campus to downtown and then back again later at night. Not to event venues. To the same 3-block area near the warehouse district where the wine bar was. My hands actually went cold. I zoomed in on the map and just stared. Same neighborhood. 2 separate nights. One of them the same night Jenna had seen the coworker story proving Alyssa was not where she said she was. The other from the Thursday before, when I had asked in the kitchen whether this alumna was royalty because my wife was picking earrings for coffee. Coffee. I sat back in the chair and felt the room shift around me. Jenna was right. Alyssa had not just been cold. She had been lying. That evening I drove downtown after work. Not to confront anyone. Not yet. I parked half a block from the wine bar and sat there with the engine off, watching people move in and out under soft patio lights. Young couples. Office people. Women in heels. Men with loosened ties. The city looked normal. Beautiful, even. Which made it worse. Betrayal always hides best inside ordinary places. I do not know how long I sat there before I saw her. Alyssa. She was across the street near the corner, not alone. She was with a man I recognized only because Jenna had said his name and my mind had started attaching it to every loose thread in the house. Evan. I had seen him once before at a university fundraiser photo Alyssa posted months back. Mid-30s, clean-cut, tailored jacket, the kind of face that probably looked trustworthy in donor meetings. Standing there in real life, angled toward my wife like they shared a private current, he looked less like a co-worker and more like a habit. They were not kissing. They did not need to be. He touched her elbow lightly while saying something, and Alyssa smiled in that same softened way I had seen through the patio glass. Then they walked toward the bar entrance close enough to tell me everything I needed to know and still leave just enough room for one last lie. I stayed in the truck gripping the wheel so hard my palms hurt. Because now the suspense was gone. What came next was the truth. And I could feel it getting ready to tear through the house the second I brought it home. I did not sleep the night I saw Alyssa walk into that wine bar with Evan. I drove home on autopilot, parked in my usual spot, and sat in the dark garage with both hands still on the steering wheel like I was waiting for my body to catch up to what my eyes had already seen. For months I had been living inside suspicion, trying to piece together a truth out of locked screens, cold shoulders, strange tones, and explanations that never fully held. But seeing her there with him, seeing the ease of it, the softness in her face, the way his hand found her elbow like that contact already belonged to them, changed something. Suspicion is exhausting. Proof is quiet. When I came into the house, Jenna was on the couch with her laptop open, some show playing low in the background. She looked up the second she saw my face and closed the computer without a word. I think she knew immediately. Maybe not the details, but enough. Enough to understand that the line had moved and nothing in the house was going back to what it had been that morning. She asked if I was okay. I told her I had seen Alyssa. Not at work. Not at a donor meeting. Not at some harmless networking thing she could explain away with polished language and a tired smile. I had seen her with Evan. Jenna looked down then, and the guilt on her face made me feel bad for her in a way I was not prepared for. She said she was sorry. I told her she had nothing to be sorry for. If anything, she had been the only person in that house honest enough to stop me from doubting my own sanity. Alyssa got home a little after 10. Same pattern as always. Garage door. Heels in the mudroom. Purse placed down too carefully. But that night I was not sitting in confusion waiting for scraps. I was standing in the kitchen with the receipt from the wine bar in one hand and the rideshare printout on the counter beside me. She walked in, saw me there, saw Jenna by the hallway pretending not to hover, and I watched the air leave her body before either of us said a word. I asked how the donor strategy session went. She said it was long. I asked if that was before or after the Pinot Noir. That did it. Everything in her face changed at once. The composure slipped, not fully, but enough. Her eyes flicked to the paper in my hand, then to Jenna, then back to me. I held up the receipt. Then I told her I had seen her downtown with Evan. No guesswork. No opening for misdirection. Just the truth laid flat between us. For a second, nobody moved. Then Alyssa did what people do when the lie finally hits a wall. She tried to shrink the shape of it before admitting anything. She said it was not what I thought. Said Evan was a friend. Said they had grabbed a drink because she needed to vent and had not told me because she knew I would react exactly like this. Exactly like this. That phrase almost made me laugh. As if a husband being angry after catching his wife sneaking around with another man was some unfair overreaction. As if my pain was the real problem in the room. I asked her how many times she had used that line on herself to make all this feel reasonable. She told Jenna to go upstairs. Jenna did not move. I said Jenna could stay. Alyssa looked at her sister then with a kind of sharp, wounded anger that told me more than either of them realized. Not because Jenna had done anything dramatic. Because Alyssa knew the house had stopped protecting her version of events. The silence she had been hiding inside was gone. I asked one question. I asked whether she was having an affair with Evan. She said no too fast. I asked whether she had feelings for him. She did not answer. That was the first real confession. I stepped closer, not aggressively, just enough that she had to look at me and not at the papers or Jenna or the floor. I asked her again. Not what story she wanted to tell. Not whether I was being unfair. Just whether there was something between her and Evan that had no business existing inside our marriage. This time she said yes. Not loudly. Not with tears right away. Just yes, Like the word had been sitting behind her teeth for weeks and was finally too heavy to keep there. Once she said it, the rest came out in pieces. It had started as emotional. That was her first defense, which told me she still wanted credit for stages. Like betrayal came with cleaner categories than it actually does. She said he understood her. Said he listened. Said she felt more like herself around him than she had felt in a long time. She said work had become the only place where she still felt seen, and Evan had become part of that. Lunches turned into longer lunches. Texts that started about donor meetings drifted into everything else. Frustrations. Complaints. Jokes. Then private drinks. Then lies. I asked whether it had gotten physical. She cried then. Not hard. Not movie scene crying. Just enough for her voice to lose its edges. And I remember hating how small the sound was, because some weak part of me still wanted it to mean something redemptive. But regret after exposure is not the same as remorse. She said yes. Twice. The first time was 2 weeks earlier after one of the fake donor dinners. The second time was the Thursday night connected to the rideshare receipt in the wine bar district. All that dressing up for coffee. All that coldness in our bed. All those dry answers and turned shoulders and little flashes of contempt when I dared ask normal questions. It all had somewhere to go now. A real place. A real man. A real betrayal. I do not remember sitting down, but suddenly I was in the kitchen chair gripping the edge of the table so hard my hands hurt. Jenna was standing near the hallway with tears in her eyes, but she stayed quiet. Alyssa kept talking, maybe because silence was worse now. She said she had felt trapped for a long time. Said our marriage had felt dead long before Evan. Said I was safe and steady, but she had started to feel like safety was all we had left. That word again. Safe. Like stability was some boring crime I had committed against her. Then she said the thing I still think about. She said she had not meant for it to happen. I looked at her and asked when exactly she thought it had happened. When she started lying. When she started turning away from me in bed. When she started dressing up for other nights and treating my questions like inconveniences. When she started saving all her warmth for a phone screen and another man. Which part was the accident? She had nothing for that. That was the moment the emotional reveal fully landed for me. Not when she admitted sex. Not when she said his name. It was when I realized how long she had been making me live inside the emotional wreckage of her choices while pretending I was the difficult one for noticing. That breaks something deeper than the affair itself. I asked if she loved him. She said she did not know. That was enough. I stood up and told her she was not sleeping there that night. She could go to a hotel, to a friend, to wherever she had been going in her head for months. I did not care. But she was not staying in the bed she had already abandoned long before tonight. She stared at me like she had expected anger, maybe shouting, maybe bargaining, but not finality. I think some part of her thought the truth would start a conversation. That we would move into definitions and damage control and emotional framing. But I was done translating her betrayal into something easier for her to survive. Jenna quietly went upstairs while Alyssa packed a bag. I heard drawers opening and closing. Closet doors sliding. The muted sounds of a shared life being broken into what mattered tonight and what could wait until later. I stayed in the kitchen and stared at the dark window over the sink. At some point I realized I was crying, but it was silent. More like the body releasing pressure than anything dramatic. When Alyssa came down with her overnight bag, her face looked stripped down. No righteous impatience. No polished explanations. Just consequence. She paused by the door and said she was sorry. I believed she was sorry in the way people are sorry when fantasy meets cost. It was not enough. After she left, Jenna came back downstairs and sat across from me at the kitchen table. We did not talk much. She made tea, neither of us drank. At one point she said she should have told me sooner. I told her maybe. But the real blame did not live with her, and I was not going to let Alyssa's choices spread poison into every other relationship in the house. The aftermath moved fast after that. By Monday, I had spoken to a lawyer. By the end of the week, Alyssa was staying somewhere else full-time. We handled the early practical things in clipped, careful conversations that sounded nothing like a marriage and everything like the remains of one. Bank accounts. The house. What came next? Jenna stayed only a few more days before moving into her new apartment, and when she left, she hugged me at the front door with the kind of quiet sincerity that makes you feel both grateful and older. As for Evan, he did not become some grand love story. Men who thrive in secret usually look a lot less impressive in daylight. Once things turned real, once there were consequences and choices and reputations attached, whatever private world he and Alyssa had built started shrinking. I found that out later, not because I cared enough to ask, but because people always end up talking. In the months after, the house felt brutally quiet. Not peaceful at first. Just hollow. Every room held the shape of someone who had been leaving for a long time before I finally stopped calling it distance and named it betrayal. But little by little, the silence changed. It stopped feeling like punishment. It started feeling honest. Looking back now, I do not think the marriage died the first time Alyssa slept with Evan. I think it died in all those smaller moments first. When she turned tenderness into irritation. When she treated my pain like an inconvenience. When she let another man become the place where all her warmth went, then came home and made me feel unreasonable for noticing the cold. That is what her sister saw before I could admit it. Not just cheating. A marriage already emptied out, with only one person still living in it like it could be saved.